The small observation craft drifted silently above Earth's atmosphere. Inside, Vexenar pressed his four-fingered hand against the viewport. His scaled skin reflected the blue-green planet below. This was his first solo mission to study the humans. And despite years of training, he felt unprepared. Vexenar belonged to the Silithian race, a species that had mastered interstellar travel centuries ago. They had watched Earth from afar for decades before deciding to make contact. The Silithian. High Council chose Vexenar, a military analyst with 20 cycles of experience, to document human warfare. His reports would help determine if humans were too dangerous to join the galactic community. The ship's computer beeped. Approaching designated landing zone, it announced in the musical tones of the Silithian language. Vexenar checked his disguise. The biomembrane covering his reptilian features gave him the appearance of a human male. It felt strange against his scales, but the scientists assured him it would hold up to casual inspection. He could pass as human, but only from a distance or in poor light. The craft touched down in a remote forest clearing. According to intelligence, a human military base lay just 15 miles east. This region, which humans called Eastern Europe, was experiencing what they termed a border dispute. To the Silithians, who had eliminated warfare within their own civilization thousands of years ago, these ongoing human conflicts were both fascinating and disturbing. Vexenar stepped from his craft. The gravity felt slightly stronger than home, making his movements heavier. The air smelled rich with organic compounds, some pleasant, others sharp and artificial. He activated the cloaking device on his ship and began his journey toward the human settlement. By nightfall, Vexenar reached the outskirts of a small town. Lights flickered in windows. He could hear human voices, occasionally punctuated by a loud bang that made him flinch. His translator identified it as laughter, a sound Silithians never made. A building at the edge of town displayed a glowing sign. His translator rendered it as Joe's Bar. Intelligence suggested such places were good for gathering information. Humans consumed alcohol to lower their inhibitions and often spoke freely about military matters. Vexenar adjusted his coat to hide the breathing apparatus at his neck and entered. The smell hit him immediately. Sweat, alcohol, smoke, and food his system couldn't process. He forced himself not to recoil and found an empty table in a dark corner. A human female approached. "What can I get you?" she asked. Her name tag. "Read Linda." "Beer, please," Vexenar replied, using a phrase he had practiced. His voice sounded almost right, though slightly deeper than intended. Linda nodded and walked away. Vexenar activated the recording device implanted in his wrist. At the bar, 3 men in what appeared to be military uniforms were talking loudly. "3rd Battalion got hit hard yesterday," said one, a tall man with close-cropped hair. "Sam got it bad, took shrapnel in both legs." "Any word on when we're moving out?" asked another. "Command's keeping quiet, but word is we're pushing forward next week. They want to take back the river crossing." Vexenar listened intently. These humans discussed violence so casually. On his world, even simulated combat was approached with ritual and respect. Here, they spoke of real bloodshed over drinks. Linda returned with his beer. Vexenar pretended to sip it. The recording device was capturing everything: conversations, environmental data, even pheromones his enhanced senses detected. A news program played on a screen above the bar. Images of destruction flashed across it. Buildings reduced to rubble, vehicles burning, humans carrying weapons. The patrons barely glanced at it. This was normal for them. The door opened, letting in a gust of cold air and a man with a bandaged face. The room quieted briefly. "Frank," called one of the soldiers. "Didn't expect to see you vertical for another week." The injured man grinned despite his wounds. Takes more than some rebel firepower to keep me down. Doctor cleared me this morning. The soldiers made room for him at their table. One pounded him on the back, another handed him a drink. Vexenor watched, fascinated. The injured human seemed to take pride in his wounds, and his companions respected him for it. This was completely opposite to Silithian culture, where being injured indicated poor planning or execution. As the night progressed, Vexenor gathered more data. The soldiers spoke of their families, children they missed, partners who waited for them. They showed each other images on small devices. They argued about sports teams and political leaders. They were complex, contradictory beings. You're not from around here, are you? Vexenor turned to find Linda standing beside his table. He hadn't noticed her approach. Just passing through, he said carefully. She studied him. You military? Intelligence, maybe? His heart rate increased. Had his cover been compromised so quickly? I am a researcher, he said. This was technically true. Studying what? Human behavior during conflict. Linda nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Well, you picked the right place. Half this town's either in the military or has family who are. She glanced at his untouched beer. Not a drinker? I am driving later. Vexenor explained. A loud crash interrupted them. At the bar, two men were shoving each other. Their faces had flushed red, a sign of human anger. Other patrons moved away, creating space. You don't know what you're talking about, shouted one man. My brother died on that hill. Yelled the other. Don't tell me about sacrifice. Before Vexenor could process what was happening, the men were striking each other with closed fists. The violence erupted so suddenly, without the formal declarations or ritualized, posturing Silithian conflicts required. Just as abruptly, other humans intervened. The soldiers from the military table pulled the fighting men apart. Take it outside or cool it, said Frank. His bandaged face stern. The angry men glared at each other but obeyed. Within minutes, they were sitting at separate tables, still visibly. Angry but contained, Linda sighed. Brothers-in-law. They've been at each other's throats since Peter's brother died in the fighting last month. One blames the government, the other blames the rebels. Vexenor nodded, recording everything. And you? What do you blame? Linda looked surprised by the question. She wiped the table absently. War itself, I guess. Doesn't much matter who started it when everybody's losing something. She moved away to serve another customer. Vexenor remained until the bar emptied. As he walked back through the dark forest to his ship, he composed his first field report in his mind. How could he explain to the High Council that humans fought wars while simultaneously hating them? That they celebrated warriors while mourning? Wars cost? That they seemed both more violent and more compassionate than Silithians? The contradictions troubled him. This assignment would be more complex than anticipated. He would need to go deeper, get closer to the human soldiers. Only then might he understand why a species smart enough to split the atom still chose to resolve differences through bloodshed. As his ship rose silently into the night sky, Vexenor knew one thing with certainty. He had only scratched the surface of humanity's relationship with war. 3 weeks had passed since Vexenor's first visit to the human settlement. During that time, he had established a cover identity as a foreign journalist named Victor. The disguise worked better than expected. Humans seemed willing to accept. Strangers with minimal questions, especially when those strangers showed interest in their stories. Not today. Vexenor sat in a military transport vehicle, bouncing along a dirt road. Beside him sat Daniel Harper, a human officer who had agreed to take him to the front lines. Vexenor had told Daniel he was writing about the human cost of conflict for an international publication. This wasn't entirely false. Never been this close to the action before? Daniel asked, noticing Vexenor's tight grip on his seat. No, Vexenar admitted. His species had excellent balance, but the vehicle's movements were unpredictable. You'll be fine. We're keeping you away from the worst of it. Just stay close to me and do exactly what I say. Daniel tapped the protective vest Vexenar wore. This stops most bullets, but nothing's guaranteed out here. The concept still shocked Vexenar. Humans had developed projectile weapons centuries ago, yet still used versions of them against each other. Silithians had moved beyond such crude tools within a single generation of their discovery. The transport stopped at a collection of temporary structures. Camouflage netting stretched overhead to hide the base from aerial observation. Soldiers moved with purpose, carrying equipment and weapons. Home sweet home, Daniel said, jumping down from the vehicle. At least until next week. We never stay in one place too long. Vexenar followed him through the camp. His recording devices captured everything: conversations, equipment specifications, tactical displays. The Silithian High Council would find this intelligence valuable, though. Vexenar increasingly felt uncomfortable about his deception. These humans trusted him. Inside the largest tent, a group of soldiers gathered around a map table. A woman with short gray hair looked up as they entered. Captain Harper, she acknowledged Daniel, then turned her gaze to Vexenar. This must be our journalist. Victor, Vexenar said, extending his hand as humans did. Thank you for allowing me to observe. Major ... Boyd, Ellen Boyd. Her handshake was firm. Ground rules: no photos of faces without permission, no specific numbers in your reports, and nothing gets published without our review. Clear? Very clear, Vexenar agreed. Major Boyd turned back to the map. We've got reports of enemy movement. Here and here, she said, pointing to areas marked with red symbols. They're bringing in more artillery. Civilian settlements in this valley are at risk. Evacuation plans? Asked a young female officer. In progress, but many civilians are refusing to leave their homes. Major Boyd's voice remained steady, but Vexenar detected increased stress hormones in her perspiration. We need to establish a defensive line here before they can get those big guns in range. The meeting continued, officers discussing strategies and resources with calm efficiency. Vexenar was impressed by their planning, but troubled by the underlying reality. This was not training or theory. These humans were organizing to kill other humans. Later, Daniel showed Vexenar to a small cot in a tent shared by 4 other soldiers. It's not the Ritz, Daniel joked, but it's dry and relatively safe. Thank you, Vexenar said, setting down his bag carefully to avoid damaging his equipment. A loud boom shook the ground. Vexenar flinched, but the human soldiers barely reacted. Artillery, explained a soldier organizing supplies nearby. He had a name tag that read Martinez. They're just ranging shots, testing distance. The real stuff will come tonight. How can you tell? Vexenar asked. Martinez shrugged. Been doing this 3 years now. You learn the patterns. They're predictable. That evening, Vexenar sat with a group of soldiers around a small fire behind earthen barriers. They shared food from packages. MREs, they called them. Meals ready to eat. The taste meant nothing to Vexenar, whose specially designed biomembrane allowed him to consume human food without digestive issues, but the nutrients did little for his alien physiology. So where are you from originally, Victor? Asked a soldier named Irene. She was young, with freckles across her nose. Far north, Vexenar replied vaguely, using his prepared answer. You don't sound Scandinavian, Martinez observed. My parents moved often, Vexenar said. I learned many languages growing up. Daniel saved him from further questions. Leave the man alone. He's here to write about us, not the other way around. The conversation shifted to memories of home. The soldiers spoke of families, pets, favorite foods, normal life things that seemed at odds with their current reality. One showed pictures of a small child learning to walk. Another described a lake where he went fishing with his father. Vexenar asked, "How do you reconcile your normal lives with ... He gestured at their weapons, the barriers, the distant sound of explosions. The soldiers exchanged glances. "We don't," Irene said simply. "You can't. This isn't normal. We just try to stay alive and get back to normal someday. We're here so those kids in the pictures can stay safe," added Martinez, "so they never have to do this." The logic puzzled Vexenar. "But humans have been fighting wars for your entire recorded history. Has this strategy been effective?" An uncomfortable silence followed. Daniel cleared his throat. "It's complicated." "We know," said a quiet soldier who had barely spoken. "All evening. But what's the alternative? Let the other side win? Let them take what they want. Sometimes you have to fight." Distant flashes lit up the night sky, followed seconds later by the rumble of explosions. The soldiers tensed, listening. "That's the civilian settlement," Daniel said grimly. "They're hitting it anyway." Major Boyd's voice came over a radio. "All units prepare. We move in 30 minutes. The soldiers stood, their faces transforming. The casual conversation vanished, replaced by focused efficiency. They checked weapons, secured equipment, nodded to each other with unspoken understanding. "You stay here," Daniel told Vexenar firmly. "This wasn't planned." "It's too dangerous. I want to observe," Vexenar insisted. "It's why I came." Daniel stared at him, then sighed. "Your funeral. Stay behind me, keep low, and if I tell you to get down, you get down instantly. Understood?" Vexenar nodded. The next hours passed in chaotic blur. The human soldiers moved through darkness toward the settlement. Explosions lit the sky. The ground shook. Smoke filled the air, making breathing difficult even with Vexenar's adapted lungs. At the edge of the settlement, they found destroyed buildings and injured civilians. The soldiers immediately shifted from combat mode to rescue work. They dug through rubble with bare hands. They carried wounded to safe areas. They gave their own water to thirsty children. Vexenar helped where he could, careful to maintain his disguise even in the chaos. He watched Daniel and Irene pull an elderly human from a collapsed home. The same humans who had checked weapons, with cold efficiency, now showed gentleness and care. The contradiction struck him powerfully. Silithians divided tasks among specialists. Warriors fought. Healers healed. Builders built. Humans, it seemed, contained all these roles within each individual, switching between them as circumstances required. As dawn broke, Vexenar stood at the edge of the ruined settlement. The ground was littered with debris. Medical teams treated the injured. Soldiers continued search efforts for survivors. "Still think we're savages?" Daniel asked, appearing beside him. The human's face was streaked with dirt and blood. "I never thought that," Vexenar said truthfully. "But you wonder why." "We keep fighting wars," Daniel said. It wasn't a question. Vexenar nodded. Daniel gestured toward the destruction. "Sometimes this is the result of our worst instincts, but how we respond to it that shows our best." He walked away to help a group lifting a concrete slab. Vexenar watched the humans work together amid the destruction they had created. Contradiction troubled him deeply. His report to the High Council would be complex. These humans were capable of terrible violence, yet also remarkable compassion. They created wounds, then worked desperately to heal them. He activated his hidden recorder, speaking softly in his native tongue. The humans fight wars unlike anything in Silithian history. They are brutal and efficient. But there is something. Here I cannot yet name something important we must understand before judging them. The military camp had relocated 3 times in the past month. Vexnar no longer felt the discomfort of his first days among humans. He had learned their rhythms, their jokes, even some of their strange food preferences. His disguise as Victor the journalist gave him access few outsiders received. The soldiers now treated him almost as one of their own. This morning, he sat with Irene and Martinez in a transport vehicle heading toward a new position. Recent enemy advances had forced a strategic retreat. The mood was tense. "You're quiet." "Today, Victor," Irene said, nudging him with her elbow. "Thinking about your next big story?" Vexnar nodded. His actual report to the Silithian High Council grew more complex each day. What had begun as a simple military assessment had evolved into something deeper. "I am thinking about why you fight," he said. Martinez laughed without humor. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Ask 10 soldiers, get 15 answers." "What is your answer?" Vexnar asked. Martinez looked out at the passing landscape. "I joined to pay for college. Stayed because these people became family." He gestured around the transport at the other soldiers. "Most days, I'm not fighting for some big idea. I'm fighting for the person next to me." Irene nodded. "Same. My grandfather was military. My mother, too. It's what we do." She paused. "But why the other side fights? That's harder to understand. Have you asked them?" Vexnar said. Both soldiers stared at him. "That's not how war works, Victor," Martinez said. Slowly, Vexnar realized he had made a cultural error. Among Silithians, opposing sides in any conflict first exchanged extensive position statements to identify misunderstandings. Humans apparently did not. "I meant through prisoner interviews," he recovered. "For my article." The tension eased. "Good luck getting permission for that," Irene said. "Command doesn't like journalists talking to prisoners." The transport stopped suddenly. Outside, shouting began. Daniel appeared at the vehicle door, his expression grim. "Everyone out. We've got a situation." They followed him to a makeshift command post. Major Boyd stood over a map, surrounded by officers. Her face was tight with concern. "The enemy hit a refugee convoy," she said without preamble. 20 minutes ago, about 5 miles east of here. Mostly women and children heading for the safe zone." A cold silence fell. Vexnar felt the change in the humans, their body chemistry shifting, hearts beating faster, muscles tensing. "Survivors?" someone asked. "Unknown. We're sending a team to assess and assist. Harper, take your squad plus medical. Be careful. Could be a trap." Daniel nodded. "Victor, you stay here." "I want to document this," Vexnar insisted. His mission required observing all aspects of human warfare, especially incidents involving civilians. Major Boyd gave him a hard look. "This won't be like the settlement. It'll be worse. Much worse." "I understand," Vexnar said, though he wasn't. Sure he did. She held his gaze a moment longer, then nodded. "Your call. Harper, keep him safe." 20 minutes later, their vehicles approached a scene that would permanently alter Vexnar's understanding of human conflict. The convoy, 6 transport trucks, and several smaller vehicles lay scattered across the road. Some still burned. The smell reached them first, burning fuel, melted plastic, and something else Vexnar would later identify as burning human flesh. Daniel stopped their vehicle. "Everyone stay alert. This area isn't secure." The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, establishing a perimeter before approaching the wreckage. Medics prepared their equipment. Vexnar followed Daniel, recording device hidden in his pocket. "Oh God," Irene whispered as they got closer. Bodies lay everywhere. Small bodies. Children. Their bright clothing made them look like broken dolls. scattered by a careless giant. Some adults had died trying to shield the young ones. Others had been running, cut down from behind. Vexnar stopped, overwhelmed. His species had eliminated warfare, partly because of their empathic abilities. Even with his emotional dampers active, the human suffering at this site threatened to overwhelm him. He recorded everything mechanically, unable to process it fully. Daniel touched his arm. "You okay?" Vexnar couldn't answer. A Silithian would understand his silence, but humans expected words. "It's okay not to be okay with this," Daniel said quietly. "None of us are." The soldiers moved among the wreckage, checking for survivors with decreasing hope. Vexnar watched their faces, anger, sorrow, determination cycling visibly. These were the same emotions Silithians felt, just expressed differently. Over here, a medic's shout broke the grim silence. "I've got a pulse!" Activity erupted around an overturned truck. Soldiers carefully lifted debris. A woman had been sheltered by the truck's frame when it flipped. She was badly injured, but alive. As they worked to extract her, a second survivor was found, a small child, unconscious but breathing, protected by the woman's body. Vexnar watched the rescue with new understanding. The same humans capable of such destruction were equally capable of desperate, gentle saving efforts. They worked tirelessly, their earlier exhaustion forgotten. The contradiction wasn't a contradiction at all. It was the full spectrum of what humans were. Hours later, back at camp, Vexnar sat alone, struggling to compose his report. How could he explain to the Silithian High Council what he had witnessed? The technical details were simple, weapons used, tactics employed. But the meaning behind it all remained elusive. Daniel found him there, offering a cup of hot liquid. Humans called coffee. Vexnar accepted it, though the substance did nothing for his alien physiology. "Writing about today?" Daniel asked, sitting heavily beside him. "Trying to," Vexnar admitted. "It is difficult to find the right words," Daniel nodded. "Some things shouldn't be put into words. Some things shouldn't happen at all." He stared into his cup. "The woman we found, her name is Kate. She was a teacher. The child with her wasn't even hers. She grabbed him when the attack started." "Will they survive?" Vexnar asked. "The boy will. Kate ... Daniel shook his head. "Not likely." They sat in silence for a while. Vexnar sensed Daniel wanted to speak further, so he waited. "Before I joined up," Daniel finally said, "I thought war was about victory, about winning." He looked at Vexnar with tired eyes. "Now I know better. There are no winners, just survivors and victims." "Then why continue?" Vexnar asked. Daniel sighed. "Because stopping doesn't guarantee peace. It just guarantees the other side's terms." He stood up. "Get some rest, Victor. Tomorrow won't be easier." After Daniel left, Vexnar activated his secure communication device, connecting to his hidden ship. For the first time since beginning his mission, he sent a message directly to the Silithian High Council, bypassing normal protocols. "Request permission to intervene in human conflict," he transmitted in his native language. "Situation more complex than anticipated. Peaceful species assessment premature. Recommend diplomatic contact to offer mediation." The response came hours later, waking him from light sleep. "Request denied. Continue observation. Do not interfere. Complete mission as ordered." Vexnar stared at the message for a long time. In all his years of service, he had never questioned orders. But as he recalled the broken bodies on the road, Kate the teacher protecting a child not her own, and the weary wisdom in Daniel's eyes, something changed within him. For the first time, he understood that observing suffering without action was its own form of violence. The High Council had sent him to judge humanity's readiness for galactic community. Instead, Humanity was judging him, and he was failing their test. 2 days after the refugee convoy attack, Vexnar received new orders from the Silithian High Council. They wanted him to observe a major battle that was expected to happen soon. Military intelligence indicated both sides were gathering forces. For what could be a deciding confrontation, Vexnar sat in the command tent, listening as Major Boyd briefed her officers. Maps and digital displays showed enemy positions and terrain features. The atmosphere was tense but focused. Intelligence confirms they've brought in heavy armor and additional artillery, Major Boyd said. They're positioning for a push through the valley. If they succeed, they'll have a clear path to the capital. Our resources? Daniel asked. Limited. We've got air support promised, but weather might ground the planes. We're digging in here, and here. She pointed to elevated positions on the map. We have to hold this line. Vexnar noticed something no one mentioned. What about the village? He asked, indicating a small settlement in the valley. The room went quiet. Major Boyd looked at him with an unreadable expression. Evacuation orders went out yesterday, she said finally. Most civilians have left. Most, Vexnar repeated. Not all. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Some refuse to leave their homes. Others can't. Elderly, sick. They'll be caught in the middle, Vexnar said. Major Boyd nodded grimly. War is ugly, Victor. Sometimes there are no good choices. Later, outside the tent, Daniel found Vexnar staring at the distant mountains. The human looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. You've changed since you got here, Daniel observed. When you first arrived, you asked questions like someone studying insects under glass. Clinical. Detached. Now you sound like you actually care. Vexnar considered his response carefully. His cover identity was at risk, but something deeper troubled him. He did care, far more than his mission parameters allowed. It is difficult to remain detached from suffering, he said finally. Daniel nodded. That's what makes us human. The phrase struck Vexnar deeply. What made Silithians different wasn't their advanced technology or longer lifespans. It was their willful distance from mesciences, from painful choices, from moral ambiguity. I need to visit the village, Vexnar said suddenly. Daniel frowned. That's not a good idea. The area will be under fire within 48 hours. That's why I need to go now, Vexnar insisted. To document those who cannot leave, to tell their stories. Daniel studied him for a long moment, then sighed. I can get you transport part of the way, but it's your risk, and I can't spare soldiers to protect you. I understand, Vexnar said. The next morning, Vexnar arrived at the village alone. It was eerily quiet. Most homes stood empty, doors left open in hasty departures. A few villagers remained, moving slowly through the streets, carrying what possessions they could dot. An elderly man sat on a bench in the village square, watching everything with rheumy eyes. Vexnar approached him. Why have you not evacuated? He asked. The old man looked up. Where would I go? I was born in this house. I'll die in it too. There will be a battle here, Vexnar explained. Very soon. It is not safe. The man shrugged. Nothing's safe. My son died in a hospital. My wife died in our bed. Safety is an illusion. Vexnar struggled to understand this logic. Silithians would never choose certain danger when safety was offered. He moved through the village, speaking with those who remained, a woman caring for her bedridden mother, a doctor who refused to abandon his patients, a family who had nowhere else to go. Each had reasons that seemed simultaneously irrational and deeply human. As evening approached, Vexnar heard engines. Military vehicles entered the village, not from Daniel's unit, but bearing enemy insignia. He quickly hid, watching his soldiers establish positions. They set up artillery in the village square, positioned snipers in church towers, dug trenches. Behind stone walls, the remaining villagers were rounded up. Vexenar expected to witness atrocities, but instead, the enemy commander addressed the civilians with surprising respect. "You will be moved to the church basement for protection," the commander said. "Food and water will be provided. When the battle is over, you may return to your homes." Vexenar realized with growing horror what was happening. The enemy forces weren't planning to harm the civilians. They were using them as a shield. They had positioned their military assets among civilian structures, knowing their opponents would hesitate to fire on these targets. Using his hidden communication device, Vexenar sent an urgent message to Daniel. Enemy in village, artillery, and heavy weapons positioned near civilians. Approximately 30 local residents being held in church. Daniel's response came quickly. "Understood. Stay hidden. We're adjusting plans." Through the night, Vexenar observed the enemy preparations. From concealment, his Silithian training allowed him to move silently, gather intelligence, and remain undetected. Every detail he recorded could save lives, both military and civilian. Before dawn, he made a decision that would change his mission forever. Using specialized equipment from his hidden ship, now relocated closer to the village, Vexenar created a detailed three-dimensional map of all enemy positions. This level of technology was far beyond what humans possessed. Sharing it would violate the non-interference protocols of the High Council. He sent the map to Daniel with a simple message. "Target these positions precisely. Avoid all others." The response was immediate. "How did you get this? This isn't possible with our technology." "Trust me," Vexenar replied. "Save the civilians." As morning light broke over the mountains, the first artillery shells landed with supernatural precision. Enemy positions exploded, while surrounding civilian structures remained untouched. The enemy soldiers looked skyward in confusion. No human targeting system could achieve such accuracy. Taking advantage of the chaos, Vexenar made his way to the church. Using a small device from his hidden equipment, he disabled the lock without breaking it. Inside, he found the villagers huddled in fear. "This way," he told them, quickly and quietly. He led them through back streets, avoiding the fighting. The elderly man from the village square struggled to keep up. Without thinking, Vexenar lifted him easily, displaying strength no human journalist should possess. The old man stared at him. "What are you?" he whispered. Vexenar met his eyes. "Someone who believes life should be preserved." At the edge of the village, Vexenar directed the civilians toward the safety of the forest, just as Daniel's forces broke through enemy lines. The precise targeting continued, minimizing civilian casualties while devastating enemy positions. Hours later, when the battle ended, Vexenar found Daniel standing amid the ruins of the village square. The human's expression showed both victory and grief, another contradiction Vexenar was learning to understand. "Your intelligence saved lives today," Daniel said quietly. "But I have questions." "I know," Vexenar replied. "No human could have mapped those positions with such precision. No technology could have targeted so accurately." Daniel looked directly at him. "Who are you really, Victor?" Before Vexenar could answer, his communication device activated. The Silithian High Council's message was brief but clear. Interference confirmed. Extraction team dispatched. Mission terminated. Vexenar faced Daniel, understanding that his time among humans was ending. He had broken his people's most sacred rule of non-interference. Yet he could not regret saving those lives. "The truth is complicated," Vexenar said. "But know this. What I've witnessed here will change more than just this war. It will change worlds." Daniel frowned in confusion, but before he could respond, distant explosions drew his attention away. When? He looked back. Vexenar was gone. Vexenar stood before the Silithian High Council, his tall frame straight and proud despite the gravity of his situation. The 7 council members looked down at him from their elevated seats. Their scaled faces showed no emotion, but Vexenar could sense their disapproval. "Observer Vexenar," the head counselor said, "you were sent to study human warfare. Instead, you interfered directly in their conflict. You exposed advanced technology. You violated our most sacred principle." "I did," Vexenar acknowledged. He had spent 3 days in isolation since his extraction from Earth, preparing for this moment. "Explain your actions," another counselor demanded. Vexenar activated a projection device. Images appeared in the center of the chamber: the refugee, convoy attack, the village battle, faces of humans he had met. "I was ordered to assess if humans were too violent to join the galactic community," Vexenar began. "I observed their capacity for destruction. It is considerable, but focusing only on this creates a distorted picture." He changed the projection to show different images: soldiers rescuing civilians, medical teams treating the wounded, Daniel comforting a child. "Humans fight wars unlike anything in our history," Vexenar continued. "They are brutal, chaotic, often seemingly senseless. But within this brutality exists something we have lost: a profound capacity for both destruction and creation, for cruelty and compassion, often within the same individual." The council members watched silently. Vexenar knew his future hung on these next moments. "When I saved those villagers, I violated our non-interference directive," he admitted. "But by not intervening, I would have violated something more important: the very values we claim make us worthy of guiding younger species." The head counselor leaned forward. "You have spent too much time among humans. You speak of emotions, of personal moral choices. These have no place in strategic assessment." "With respect," Vexenar replied, "that is exactly why we fail to understand humans. We have removed emotion from our decisions for so long that we no longer recognize its value. Humans embrace their contradictions. They contain their opposites. This makes them unpredictable, yes, but also remarkably adaptable." He displayed new images: peaceful human gatherings, art, children playing. "In my final analysis, humans are not ready for full galactic integration," Vexenar concluded. "But not because they are too violent. They are not ready because we are. Not ready for them. They would challenge our certainties. They would question our detachment. They would demand we remember what it means to feel deeply, to risk everything for what we believe is right." Silence filled the chamber. The counselors communicated silently among themselves, using the subtle telepathic abilities all Silithians possessed. Finally, the head counselor spoke. "You will be removed from military service, Vexenar. Your actions cannot go unpunished." Vexenar had expected this. His career was over, but the counselor continued. "However, your observations have value. You will be reassigned as a cultural liaison. If we are to understand humans better, perhaps we need someone who has experienced their contradictions firsthand." The punishment was lighter than Vexenar had anticipated. He bowed his head in acceptance. "There is one more matter," the head counselor added. "A human has been asking questions about you, a military officer named Daniel Harper. He has been showing other humans a detailed map you provided, claiming it shows technology beyond their current capabilities. How do you suggest we handle this?" Vexenar considered the question carefully. Daniel Harper is intelligent and trustworthy. Perhaps it is time for a limited, controlled revelation, not to their governments or military leaders, but to individuals who have demonstrated wisdom. The council erupted in objections. The head counselor raised a hand for silence. "A bold proposal," she said. "It will require further deliberation. For now, you are dismissed." 6 months later, Vexnar sat in a small cafe in Geneva, Switzerland. He wore his human disguise again, though it had been modified to be more comfortable for extended wear. His new role as cultural liaison allowed him limited contact with selected humans. The door opened, and Daniel entered. He looked different in civilian clothes, more relaxed, though still alert. His eyes scanned the room before settling on. "Vexnar, Victor," he said, taking the seat opposite. "Or whatever your real name is." "Vexnar," the alien replied, speaking his true name to a human for the first time. Daniel nodded, unsurprised. "After you disappeared, things got strange." The war ended 3 weeks later. Both sides suddenly agreed to peace talks. International mediators appeared with solutions no one had considered before. Vexnar said nothing. He was not authorized to confirm or deny Silithian involvement in the peace process. "Then I got a message," Daniel continued. "Coordinates for this meeting. A chance to hear the truth." He leaned forward. "So what are you, CIA? Some secret government program?" "I am not from any human government," Vexnar said carefully. Daniel studied him. "That village map, the targeting precision, the way you disappeared." He took a deep breath. "You're not human at all, are you?" Vexnar glanced at the small device on his wrist. It showed green, permission to proceed with limited disclosure. "No," he said simply. "I am not." Daniel sat back, exhaling slowly. "I've considered every possibility, but until you just confirmed it, I wasn't sure I could believe it." He ran a hand through his hair. "Why tell me now?" "Because you saw beyond your training," Vexnar explained. "When most soldiers would have simply followed orders and bombed the entire village, you sought a better way. You valued all life, not just those on your side. And you helped make that possible," Daniel said. "You broke rules to save lives." Vexnar nodded. "My people have observed yours for many years. We saw your wars, your divisions, your conflicts. We judged you as too violent, too unpredictable for contact. I was sent to confirm this assessment. What did you conclude?" Daniel asked. "That humans contain multitudes," Vexnar said, quoting a human poet he had read. "You can be both terrible and wonderful, often in the same moment. This makes you dangerous, yes, but also valuable. The galaxy needs your perspective." Daniel absorbed this in silence. Finally, he asked, "What happens now?" "Limited contact," Vexnar explained, "with selected individuals like yourself. A gradual exchange of ideas before technologies. A careful introduction to the wider community of intelligent species. How many others know? Very few. This must proceed slowly to avoid disrupting your societies." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "All those times I talked about warfare with you, explained human conflict, I was actually teaching an alien about our worst habits. And your best," Vexnar added. "Your capacity for violence is matched by your capacity for growth, for change, for redemption. This is rare among spacefaring species." They talked for hours as afternoon faded to evening. Daniel asked questions about Silithian society, culture, history. Vexnar answered what he could, within his authorization limits. As they finally prepared to leave, Daniel asked one last question. "In your report to your leaders, what was your final recommendation about humans?" Vexnar considered how to translate the nuance of his actual report into simple terms. "I told them that humans are like fire," he said finally. "Potentially destructive. Yes, but also a source of warmth, light, and transformation. The wise do not fear fire. They learn to tend it carefully." Daniel smiled. "I can live with that assessment." "Good," Vexnar replied, "because now I must learn from you as well. My new assignment is to understand how humans transform conflict into cooperation, hatred into reconciliation, enemies into friends. That's something we're still figuring out ourselves, Daniel admitted. Then we will learn together. Vexenar sighed. And perhaps in time, the account of human warfare that I bring back to my world will be not just alluring, but also a map showing how to evolve beyond it. As they walked out into the Geneva evening, an alien and a human side by side, Vexenar reflected on how far he had come from the detached observer who had first arrived on Earth. He had set out to study human brutality, but had instead discovered something far more valuable: the complex, contradictory nature of a species that contained both the darkest violence and the brightest hope the galaxy had ever seen.